Hello. So today I wanted to start the discussion of other possible, staples for Pioneer. And so I wanted to do this video. So if you're brand new to Pioneer, these are cards to look after. If you're wanting to, play competitive Magic to a certain level, these are the cards based that you should pick up that are commons and uncommons, and they will be the foundation or the support cards of many decks that you'll probably come across in Pioneer. So I thought this would be a great video overall, just because of the fact that a lot of people like to play budget, and it's great for new Pioneer players to really know what cards to grab if you can get them cheap, right? Because that is one of the most important critical components of deck construction. So we're gonna start off with honorable mentions. I have basically four for every color, so let's get into it. Um, all that glitters, if you're wanting to build a artifact or an enchantment based Boggle style deck, all that glitters is a foundation for those styles of decks. There's also the MTG also, which does a similar effect. So either one of those two cards you should probably pick up if you're wanting to get into that kind of strategy. Rafine's Informant is kind of just a solid overall card. It usually sees play in Greasefang decks because it gets to loot away a Parhelion, but don't let that deter you. I think the card is better even good outside of that strategy. Dauntless Bodyguard is more for your aggro style decks. He makes his cut today, but next, I think in Brothers War, he's probably going to be replaced, but I'm not exactly sure. And Thraben Spectre is a solid one drop for mid-range mono white, and also it can be an aggressive style deck, but it's not normally. It's not as good because it's a 1/2, and you want aggressively powered stats. So that is our white. Next on the color pie is blue. Now, what makes these cards in this section is they're probably not as, either A, they're not as powerful, or two, they're limited based on what decks they go into. And the ones in the power top 10 are more, just around, right? You could play them in many different types of decks. So blue, we have Censor, Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce usually sees play in tempo or control. Censor sees play in control. Lofty Denial sees play in mainly flying based tempo strategies. So I picked this one over the other the 3-drop one for spirits and enchantments, just because I think Lofty Denial is more, it's easier to turn on. You don't necessarily have to be in spirits, but it's it's still a good magic card. 2 mana, basically slightly better mana leak potentially. And then we have Opt. It's been outclassed by a card that you're going to see later on, but it's still a good magic card if you were trying to go with spell slinging style blue strategies. It's good to have your 5 through 8 copies as well. Now let's get into black. So Go Blink is a solid sideboard potential card. It could even see play in main board. Duress is finicky, but it really depends on what's on top of the meta. It can become main board potential if you're looking for a budget deck, right? Because if you can't Forethought Seize, this is your second. Replace this second, option for it. Heartless Act is one of the best removal spells. There's not as many creatures going around that has +++1 counters on them. So for the most part, this is a 2-mana kill most things. But keep in mind, it's iffy, right? And Citrus Suppliers is a honorable mention if you're trying to go into a strategy where you actively care about milling and filling your yard. And it's a 1-mana 1/1. It's pretty great. It's going to get better even in the next iteration with Diabolic Intent. So it's going to keep going up. The other one you could probably mention in this section is the Cat Cauldron Familiar. It's also pretty solid. It is limited to mainly just sacrifice-based strategies, which I think Supplier has a little bit more. I guess they're about the same, aren't they? But either way, I think these are the ones that you want to start targeting if you're wanting to build something in black. Red. Red is one of the more difficult ones. because there's so many decently playable cards in red, but a lot of them are really restricted. Like Phoenix Chick is a pretty good Magic card out of the last set. There is other ones that are like a 1 mana hasty beatdown type creatures, and they didn't make the cut. I went with a different diversity of removal packages. So let's get into them. Play with fire. If you're typically more of a aggressive strategy, you want your removal to also be able to hit face. Unless it is 4 damage or more, so that way you could take down, you know, a mid-range pet threat out of your sideboard. Play with fire is better main board because you can hit face. A braid is a classic sideboard potential card. It can kill Greasefang, so that is a huge bonus. It's instant speed, so that is pretty solid overall. Spikefield Hazard is more for the aggressive style decks that maybe want to cut some lands for a little bit of a burn spell. It's also decent for mid-range decks, so that way they could deal with Llanowar Elf, but still have a land. And then Fury Impulse is more for those mid-range strategies that just want to do 3 damage for 1 mana. So either Fiery Impulse or Strangle, that would be under this section of cards. So hopefully that breakdown makes perfect sense. So like I said, aggressive decks want something like Play with Fire. Mid-range strategies want something like Fire Impulse, where you know, you're trying to control the board until you execute your gameplay. Now, green, keep in mind Kiora technically is multicolor, so I could have covered a multicolor section, but it's mainly ran in green only. So she is solid if you're looking into getting into, you know, green base strategies, green ramp. Haven is one of the premier, and Grazer are the premier ways of ramping. Outside of the cards we're going to discuss later on, which are the backbone of this format. So if you're wanting to get into a rampy style deck, these are the 3 pieces that you could look into if you're wanting to not necessarily go into rares and mythics and you want to play a budget ramp strategy. These are definitely your options. Now I also get Terra Sunder is also multicolored, but you don't necessarily need the black. It's pretty good by itself. Exile target, artifact, or enchantment at instant speed. It's pretty good overall. So it does have some upscalability, but overall I think it is a card that you're going to be happy having a couple copies in your collection. Now, the multicoloreds. Now, Mayhem Devil is an amazing card. Now, it's limited to the strategy that it can go in. It's one of the foundations of that strategy, Rakdos Sacrifice. So if this is a deck playstyle you really want to pick up, it's definitely in consideration. It deals with the elves. It deals with so many potential lower as well as tokens. So it could definitely help you control the board as you're comboing off with your cat slightly. So Mayhem Devil, if you're wanting to get into a sacrifice or aristocrat strategy, pick up some Mayhem Devils for your collection. Tainted Indulgence is more for either a control, Dimir, or it is for a reanimator style deck, which you kind of have a little bit of control pieces, but you're trying to fill your yard with a reanimation target. Growth Spiral. You should add this to your collection if you're looking to maybe go Simic Ramp. I know Simic Ramp has not been a huge component of Pioneer, but I'm going to try to get that, to make that where that changes, right? Because it's kind of insulting because Growth Spiral is really good of a Magic card, and the fact that it sees less play than it should, it's a huge red flag. And then we have Anvil. If you're planning on getting to artifact-based sack strategies, it's definitely a solid card overall. It can also go in your Cauldron cat deck because you do sack the food to get the cat back. So you should be able to get a 1/1 out of that exchange. I don't know if necessarily if it's ideal, but if you're wanting to go with a budget strategy where you have mainly uncommons, you could do Anvil, Mayhem Devil, Cauldron Familiar with Witch's Oven. That is a foundation you could work towards. Now, sideboard honorable mentions. And these are cards that are all-stars, typically in your sideboard, depending on the meta. You have Gust, is 4 mono green, mainly. Red is semi, important, but not necessarily. Rending Volley is really good if you're a red-based deck. 4 damage to target white or blue creature is really good, and it can't be countered, so it really helps you fight against Bant Spirits. So if you're looking for, if you're planning on playing red and you want some sideboard cards to help with matchups that are, at parity with you, like Spirits, this is definitely something you need in your collection. Now, there's Tormod's Crypt, or you can go with Soul Guy Lantern. Either one is solid, solid uncommon that can be put into your sideboards for graveyard hate. Mystical Dispute, if you're in blue, depending, it doesn't really matter what strategy you're in, your control, your tempo, does not matter. Having a couple Mystical Disputes against the control matchup is ideal and preferred. So it is definitely something you should have in your collection if you're in blue, period. Hello, it's your host, KebbieG. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, also the bell notifications. Don't forget to check out the sweet stuff that's down in the description down below. Now, let's get into the top 10 on my list. These are cards that potentially can be in multiple decks. Now, Dovin's Veto at face value doesn't appear to be a card that could be put in multiple decks. That's because really there's not as many Azorius-based tempo strategies. If there was more, I would still consider Dovin's Veto for my sideboard, as well as potentially some main board slots. It can't be countered, so it's really powerful. And countering any non-creature spell is absolutely powerful in its own self. It is number 10 because it is less flexible, and unlike the other ones where the deck is constructed around it, this card is more of a really good role player for Azorius-based strategies. So, number 9 on our list is Narset. This uncommon sees a lot of play. It's a mixture of sideboards and main boards. Dimir Control has, I believe, has switched to this as their primary win con. So, if you're looking to construct a deck where you actively just want to shut your opponent down so that way they can't draw, this is probably a good solid option. It's good in multiple matchups, and it hurts control, tempo, you kind of name it. There's a lot of decks that actively want card advantage, and this stops them from having card advantage. And like I said, Days Undoing with this, it is a deck, so that is why it's number 9 on the list over Dovin's Veto, is because this is actually the key, a key piece for the foundation of a deck. Number 8 on our list, we got a little bit of a duo. They're basically semi the same card. Now, both of these play a unique role. So they're two types of decks, right? So Arclight Phoenix plays these in the sideboard. If they expect graveyard hate, they have an alternative way to win. These two also can be just good on their own if you're wanting a spell slinging style deck. And they're both relatively cheap. I would recommend picking them up for your collection. So hopefully this video is helping you guys out. Because like I said, I really wanted to key in, let you guys know what commons to uncommons to look for on the cheap. And both of these cards are honestly good foundational pieces for a budget deck if you're wanting just to get into Pioneer right out of the gate, if you're into a blue-red type strategy. Number 7 on our list. These two cards usually show up together. So I wasn't really sure where I wanted to put Kumino, but Swift Spear, I was like, you know what, these two traditionally show up in the exact same list. It's a little bit lower to the ground, aggressive, and since Kumo triggers prowess, it works quite well. And not to mention the second mode is usually how it happens. So turn 1, it's hit, and then turn 2, you play Swift Spear, gets a +1/+1 counter, attack for 2. So these two cards are the foundation and of aggro strategies for red. And there's an exact reason for it, because both of these cards are powerful in a vacuum. You kind of want all three modes of the faces. And also Swift Spear, haste, prowess, 1-2 body is pretty good for 1. So these are all just fine rated cards on turn 1. Now, like I said, there is Phoenix Chick. There is some other 1-drop red creatures that just didn't make the cut because there's so many good ones. And I think these are the best of the best. Number 6 on our list is a card that makes it this far down only because it's Rakdos, right? So it can't be put into every deck. So keep that in mind. So if it was like red, it would definitely be higher on the list, or if it was just black, it'd be higher on the list. But it right now, it traditionally only sees play in vampires or Rakdos mid-range. It's a strong magic card for pound, has removal, has eluding. It's a fine body, 2 mana 3/2 that trades up with a Bone Crusher Giant. But of course it gets stomped by a Bone Crusher Giant, but that's fine, right? The card, it still leaves a blood token even if it gets removed, which is why it's really potent in the decks that it's a part of. So if you're wanting a budget-friendly Rakdos centerpiece, this could be definitely in your collection for that. Number 5 on our list. Consider. This card shows up across all types of strategies. Control, tempo, anything that has blue in it should play some numbers of considers. So if you don't have this in your collection, it should be one of your first targets. I get it's definitely on the rise on price because of the fact that it's used everywhere. So definitely consider this card for your collection. Number 4 on our list is a card that sees a lot of mix between sideboard and mainboard play. Sideboard wise is traditionally put in the sideboards of aggressive type strategies where they might take a couple 1-drops out if they're facing another aggressive deck for some portable holes to interact with their aggressive pieces. It also sees play in control as a sideboard card, or I think it's like a 2-2 split, something like that, where they want some interaction against Llanowar Elves and Mystic, and they want also the ability to interact with red because it does get faces, because even in enchantment mode, so that is quite relevant. Portable Hole is efficient. It's 1 white, so this is definitely a card that you probably need in your collection if you're a white base Magic the Gathering player. Even if you're not and you're still trying to figure out what colors you like the most, just pick this card up if you can on the cheap. Number 3 on our list is the best black removal spell in Pioneer. And you're like, this is number 3. What could be number 2 and 1? Well, those cards are just going to be just as good, if not better than this card. But Fatal Push is amazing. It is a main board slot card, just like every other card that has been featured in my top 10. That was one of my criterias. It has to be something that you want to play main board, right? It has to be in the foundation of the concept of the deck itself. And Fatal Push thrives in any black-based strategies that is looking for a little bit of removal. And it does show up occasionally in sideboards as if the card has like Bolus's Citadel, where they have a combo strategy main board. In game 2, they address certain matchups that they might be weak against. That is one time where Fatal Push shows up there. But it is definitely a card you need in your collection if you're black based. Number 2 on our list is a card that I should have mentioned as a potential candidate for the Power 9 video of, non-ban cards, but it shows up here this high up on the list. It is unbelievable. Most of the time it's a 1 blue draw 3, which is really good. So Arclight Phoenix adapts this strategy. There's so many different decks. Like even if Young Pyromancer in its own deck traditionally plays 4 copies of this. So for the most part, if you're in blue, this is a nice cheap card. I believe it's like 25 cents. because it's been reprinted to the ground, and it is so awesome. It's really strong. So if you want to have some powerful common and uncommons, if you're in blue, you should definitely be running this. So I'm pretty sure you guys know what number 1 is. It's a card that I've been referencing, or the 2 cards that I've been referencing in other parts of this video. Number 1 on our list is Llanowar Elf and Elvish Mystic. Again, these cards show up in ramp. They show up in mid-range. They don't really show up in aggro because, I mean, what are you ramping into? I mean, what are you aggroing? Why do you need that extra mana in aggro, I guess? Is more of the question. It shows up in elves. It's one of the foundational pieces of elves. So if you are wanting to get into green, you should have 4 copies of both of these cards because they are basically an auto include in every green base strategy. The numbers vary, right? So like me for dinosaurs, I play 3 and 3, but if you're in mono green devotion, you're playing 4 of each. So the numbers do vary depending on how much you value the 1 mana, the 1 drop that ramps you. But so, like I said, it shows up in mid-range, it shows up in ramp. It's just both are just really good Magic cards. So, if there's something you think I missed, or you could probably debate Dovin's veto, definitely. But Narset, I think, is definitely in this qualification because it does actively see 20% of the meta share for a uncommon. So a lot of these cards, I tried to make sure that they are the foundations of multiple strategies and decks. So that way you don't just buy into these cards and then you're like, well, I don't really like the strategy, and it just doesn't see any play anywhere else. So you're just kind of like, I just wasted money. I don't want you to waste money. So these are the cards. Like I said, let me know down in the comments if there's a card I think I missed in the honorable mentions or in the top 10 list. What would your top 10 be? Let me know that and down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. These are free ways of help supporting my content, and I very much appreciate it. I want to reach 500 as my next target. If you guys help me get to 500, I will be honorably blessed. So thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.